Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Amir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we pick up today on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Samach Ches Sif Beis. Our learning should be as chus for Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara B'Shivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayom U'Bein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziem Mitzara L'Rvacha Me'afela L'Oiro B'Yishibet L'Geula, Hashta B'Galo V'Zman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. Our learning should also be as chus for Refuah Shalema for Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam, who is in need of Rachamei Shamayim. So, here in Siman Reish Samach Ches, we are discussing the halachas of one who makes a mistake in his davening. He is davening Shemoneh Esrei for Shabbos, and he makes some kind of a mistake. So we pick up here in Sif Beis, says the Mechaber, Im ta'a v'hischil tfilas hachoil. If somebody makes a mistake when he's davening Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos, and he just goes straight into the weekday Shemoneh Esrei, so he says Hakel HaKadosh, and then he goes Ata Chaynin L'Adam Das Amalamed Le'enosh Bina. And at some point during the Shemoneh Esrei, he realizes his mistake. So says the Mechaber, Im ta v'hischil tfilas hachoil, if somebody makes a mistake and he begins the weekday Shemoneh Esrei, Goimer oisa bracha shenizgar ba sheta'a, he should complete the bracha that he's in the middle of when he realizes his mistake, umaschil shal Shabbos, and then he should shift right away into Shabbos davening. So, for example, somebody's davening Shemoneh Esrei, he goes Hakel HaKadosh, Ata Chaynin L'Adam Das Amalamed Le'enosh Bina. Oy, what am I doing? I'm davening a Vachadik Shemoneh Esrei. It's Shabbos. What should he do? He shouldn't just cut himself off. He should finish the bracha. Chaneinu Me'itcha De'abina V'Haskel Baruch Ata Hashem Chaynein Adas. He should finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein. Then he should shift in to the Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei. So if he's holding my Ma'ariv, now he should begin Ata Kidashta as Yom HaShvi Lishmecha. And the Mechaber says, when it comes to this halacha, Lo Yishna Nizkar Bebracha Achas Mishar Habrachais. It doesn't matter. I skipped a line over here. My apologies. The Mechaber said, Goimer oisa bracha shenizkar ba sheto baslo shel Shabbos. Lo yishna nizkar beberchas ata chaynein. In regards to this halacha, it doesn't matter which bracha he remembers he's mistaken. It doesn't matter if this occurred in middle of the bracha of ata chaynein. Lo yishna nizkar bebracha achas mishar brachas. Or he remembers in middle of one of the other brachas. Maybe he got all the way up to V'lam al shinim al tihi sikva. All right, you said V'lam al shinim al tihi sikva. You got to finish the bracha of Brechas Haminim. You have to finish the bracha of V'lam al shinim. And after you say Baruch Ata Hashem Shavra Oivim U'Machni Azedim, now you'll shift into Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei. You'll pick up with the beginning of the bracha of Kedushas Hayom. So if it's Ma'ariv, you'll pick up by Ata Kidashta. If it's Shachris, you'll pick up by Yismach Moshe. If it's Mincha, you'll pick up by Ata Echad V'Shimcha Echad. This halacha is true, says the Mechaber in the top line of Mem Gimel Amud Beis, Bein Ba'arvis, Bein B'Shachris, Musaf, U'Mincha. According to the first opinion brought down by the Mechaber, this is the halacha whether you goof Friday night Ma'ariv, or you goof in the Shemoneh Esrei of Shabbos morning Shachris, or the Shemoneh Esrei of Musaf Shabbos morning, or the Shemoneh Esrei of Mincha Shabbos afternoon. If by any of those Shemoneh Esreis, after you finish the bracha of Hakel HaKadosh, you accidentally shift into the weekday Shemoneh Esrei, so the halacha is very simple. Whatever bracha you're in middle of, when you remember your mistake, you complete that bracha. And then as soon as you complete that bracha, that's when you shift into the Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei. At what point in the Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei do you pick up the Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei? At the beginning of the bracha of Kedushas Hayom. So like we said, if you're dealing with the Friday night Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei, you'll pick up by Ata Kidashta Yom HaShvi Lishmecha. So too by Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, you always pick up from the beginning of the bracha of Kedushas Hayom. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah over here. Turning back to Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines off the bottom. Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Beis. Goimer. The first thing you do is you complete the bracha that you're in middle of. So the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain to us why is that appropriate. So you started your Shemona Esrei. It's Friday night Ma'ariv. Why don't you just cut off right there? Why? Oh, whoops, made a mistake. Cut off right there, and then go. And the truth is, you would think that there's a very strong argument for why you should do that. We're always very, very makpid, Safik brachas lekula. We never want you to make an unnecessary bracha because of the terrible avera of Shem Shamayim Levatala. You're saying a bracha shein etzricha, so when you say Baruch Atah Hashem Chaynein Hadas, you're making an extraneous bracha doesn't seem to be appropriate. You're being Moitzi Shem Shamayim. Why don't we just break you off before you get to Baruch Atah Hashem? Ata Chaynein Adam Das, whoops. Seems to be a very powerful argument. It explains to Mishnah Berurah what the rationale of this halacha is. Says the Chavetz Chaim Atamhu, the reason for this halacha is the bedinhu, really, me'ikar adin, the bailutz liyei shmona esrei brachas b'Shabbos k'may b'chol. Really, you should daven a full shmona esrei on Shabbos. Shabbos Ma'ariv, Shabbos Shachris, Shabbos Mincha. Really, you should daven a full Shemona Esrei by every one of the Shabbos Tfilos. And you have to add in Shabbos, because you have to add in Me'ein HaMorah. You have to mention the Kedushas HaYom. So fine. So you'll add another bracha. Or maybe you won't even add another bracha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, really, you should daven a full Shemona Esrei, Ulahazke Kedushas HaYom Ba'avodah. And then you know what you should do? The same way on Rosh Chodesh you say Yalav Yavai, and you say Yom Rosh Chodesh Hazeh, or on Sukkot Chalamoid you insert Yalav Yavai and you say Yom HaSukkos Hazeh. So on Shabbos, really what you should do is, in the bracha of Ritzei, what we call here the bracha of Avodah, you should put in Yalav Yavai, and you should say Yom HaShabbos Hazeh. So that's what Chavetz Chaim is saying here. He says, the bedinhu, really me ikaradin, the bailutz li shmona esrei brachas b'Shabbos k'may b'chol. Really, you should daven a full shmona esrei on Shabbos the same way you do during the week. Ulahazkir kedushas hayom ba'avodah, and you should mention kedusha Shabbos in the bracha of ritzei in the form of yalav yavai k'may b'rosh chodesh v'chol shamayit, the same way you do on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed Yom Tov. So why don't we? V'rak b'shem kvoid Shabbos. It's an inyan of Kavod HaShabbos. Lo yatrachu rabbanon. The Chachamim wanted Shabbos to be a nice, easygoing, pleasant day. They didn't want the Shabbos davening to be very stretched out and long and allow it to become onerous on an individual. And therefore, Lo yatrachu rabbanon. They weren't matriach you to daven a full Shemona Esrei. V'tikdu bracha achas emtsoes l'Shabbos. And instead, they cut down our Shemona Esrei, which is really not Shemona Esrei nowadays. Really, we don't say 18 brachas, we say 19 brachas, because later on, after Anshe Knesset Agdola wa Mesakid Shemona Esrei, the Chazal added in the brachas Aminim, the bracha of Olam Alshinim, so it became 19 brachas. But instead of having 19 brachas on Shabbos, Chazal cut it down to 7. You have the first 3 brachas, Avos, Gevuros, and Kedushas Hashem. The last 3 brachas, Avodah, Hodah, and Berachas HaShalom. And they inserted one bracha in the middle, Kedushas Hayom. They inserted one bracha in the middle for Shabbos. And they did this Mishum Kvoid Shabbos, says the Chavetz Chaim. V'lachein, therefore, b'di'evet shehischil habracha, if now you went ahead and you started saying one of the weekday brachas, so let's say you started saying Ata Kohen L'Adam Das, Goimra. Now, go ahead and complete it. You know why? Because it's not really an extra bracha. Really, the bracha of Ata Chaynein is just as appropriate to Shabbos as it is to Tuesday. It's just that Chazal made your life easy. They cut down Shemona Esrei on Shabbos to 7 brachas instead of 19. But is Ata Chaynein inappropriate to Shabbos? No, not at all. It's completely appropriate to Shabbos. So you started saying it, Goimra. Finish it. Shehi Ru'liyah min adin. Because min adin, it's completely appropriate to Shabbos. V'achakach maskal bracha miyuchedes l'Shabbos. When you finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein, or whichever bracha it is in which you remember that it's Shabbos, so then you'll pick up with the bracha of Shabbos and you'll go weiter. Ois Katan Gimel, Shal Shabbos, when you remember, that's when you go back to the bracha of Shabbos. V'hu adin b'chol zeh le'inyan Yom Tov. The Chavetz Chaim points out, we're speaking here Shabbos, 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 Shabbos. This same halacha applies on Yom Tov. If on Yom Tov you say Hakel HaKadosh, and then instead of going into Ata V'Chartanu, you go into Ata Kohen L'Adam Das, again, you started the bracha, You'll finish the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Chayrin Adas, and then you'll go into the Yom Tov davening. Okay. Now, we saw over here that according to the day of Rishona, turning to Mem Gimel Amud Beis, this halacha is true in the Ma'ariv of Friday night, in the Shacharis of Shabbos morning, in the Musaf of Shabbos morning, and in the Mincha of Shabbos afternoon. That was the first opinion over here. Now we have a V'yesh Omrim, that's the sheet of Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rambam. Says the Mechaber, V'yesh Omrim, there are those that say, de b'musaf, that Musaf is different. V'yesh Omrim de b'musaf, paisek afilu be'emtza bracha. By Musaf, if you goof in Musaf, and you shifted to the Vacha Dikah Shemona Esrei, you would cut off your bracha in mid-sentence. So, if by Musaf, Hakel HaKadosh, Atachayin Adam Dasa B'Lamed Le'enosh Bina, you don't continue the bracha. Now you realize it's Shabbos, you stop right over there, and you pick up Tikanta Shabbos Ratzitza Karbonoseh. Why is Musaf different than the other tefillos? So it's not that difficult to understand. Some of you might be guessing the answer already, but let's see the Mishnah Berurah here is cutting dalit. V'yesh Omrim de b'musaf desfira lahu, because these shitas hold de b'musaf lo'ishach klal tefillah shmona esrei brachas. It's very hard to say that the regular 18 brachas of the Vacha Dikah Shemona Esrei are appropriate for the davening of Musaf. Daf b'choil, because even during the week when you have a Musaf, ein Omrim rak sheva brachas. You never have a Musaf that's comprised of a full Vacha Dikah Shemona Esrei. Musaf is an add-on. Musaf is not one of the standard tefillos. So you want to tell me that on Shabbos or Yom Tov, Ma'ariv, Shacharis, and Mincha, a full Shemona Esrei is really appropriate. So if you start one of the Vacha Dikah brachas, you should conclude it. I can understand that. But Musaf is always an add-on. Musaf is always an additional tefillah. And whenever you add Musaf, Musaf is only comprised of 7 brachas. Musaf is always the first 3 brachas of Shemona Esrei, Avos, Gvuros, Kedushas Hashem, the last 3 brachas, Avodah, Hodah, and Berkas HaShalom, and then a bracha of Kedushas Hayom that includes the carbon Musaf of that specific day in the middle. It never has 18 or 19 brachas. So therefore, these shittas argue that the weekday brachas have no shaykhis to the davening of Musaf, and they're wholly inappropriate. And therefore, according to these shittas, you would have to cut off the weekday bracha mamish in middle. The tam hadeh kamaisa. And what's the counter argument to this? What's the argument of the day of Rishona? They argued b'di'evet gam b'musaf im ispal shmona esrei brachas b'di'evet. If you're davening a Shemona Esrei for Musaf on Rosh Chodesh or on Chol HaMoed or on Shabbos, and you go in and you daven a full 18 or 19 brachas, v'rak hoisif ba v'naseh lefanecha chayvosenu b'timidei yoim u'b'karban Musaf. Let's say somebody comes to Musaf and he davens a full Vacha Dikah Shemona Esrei. And then somewhere in the middle of Shemona Esrei, he adds in a few phrases. One of the phrases that he adds in, the text that the Chavetz Chaim just gave us. You add in, V'naseh lefanecha chayvosenu, we will perform before you our obligations b'timidei yom, by bringing the Tamid Shel Shachar and the Tamid Shel Bein Arabayim, u'b'karban Musaf, and by adding the appropriate carbon Musaf, Yatza, he's Yatza. So says the Chavetz Chaim, the day Rishona argues that the weekday Shemona Esrei is really appropriate to Musaf also, because it's very easy to be Yotze, the Chiv of davening a Tfilas Musaf. You don't have to daven the Tfilas Musaf that's printed in the Machzer, or that's printed in the Siddur in the Shalosh Regalim section. Really, you could be Yotze your Chiv of davening a Tfilas Musaf by davening a regular weekday Shemona Esrei, and just sticking in somewhere in the middle, the Naseh Chayvosenu between the Ayom or B'karban Musaf. You don't even have to recite all of the psukim from the Torah that describe that day's Musaf. So therefore, the Vacha Dikah brachas of Shemona Esrei argues the day of Rishona, the day of Rishona, are very appropriate for a Yom Tov or a Shabbos Musaf davening as well. And indeed, we're going to see this halacha very soon in the Mechaber in Sif Daled, that you could be Yotze a Tfilas Musaf in this way. Lekach gam lo shaykh b'di'evet habracha shel choil, and therefore the Dei Kamaisa argues that really this is appropriate to the Shemona Esrei of Musaf as well. Ois cotton hay. So this day of Shnia holds, Paisek afilu be'emtza habracha. The day of Shnia holds that when it comes to Musaf, you would break off the vachadika bracha that you started making in midstream, and you'd go right into the proper Musaf davening of that day. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton hay, v'chein pasku ha'achrayim. This is the way the achrayim paskin, and they paskin this way mishum safek bracha levatala. They paskin this way because of the extreme avera of being moisi shem shamayim levatala, and based on that we have the rule safek brachas lekula. So if we even have a safek in halacha whether you should make the bracha, we're going to tell you not to make the bracha, and therefore the halacha comes out, according to the Mishnah Berurah, what we learned over here, the halacha comes out like this. You're davening Ma'ariv Friday night, you do Baruch Atah Hashem HaKel HaKadosh, what am I doing at Shabbos? Finish the bracha. Baruch Atah Hashem HaKadosh Adas, then shift it to Atakidashta Es Yom HaShvi L'Shmecha. It doesn't matter if you remembered in the middle of bracha of Atachainen, or you remembered in the middle of Rifa'enu, or you remembered in the middle of Ala Tzadikim Ala Chasidim. Wherever you remember, once you started that bracha, if it's Ma'ariv, if it's Shachris, if it's Mincha Shabbos afternoon, whatever bracha you remember in the middle of, conclude that bracha with the chasima, Baruch Atah Hashem Chaynen Adas, Baruch Atah Hashem Roifei Chabasar, Roifei Chayle Amo Yisrael, Baruch Atah Hashem Shover Oivim Umachni Azedim, whichever bracha you were in the middle of, conclude that bracha, and then shift into the proper Shabbos Shmon Esrei by picking up at the beginning of the bracha of Kedushas Hayoim, either Ata Kidashta, or Yismach Moshe, or Ata Echad V'Shibcha Echad. But what happens if you do this by Musaf? If by Musaf you do Hakel HaKadosh, and instead of saying Tikanta Shabbos, Retzitza Karban, you say Ata Chaynin L'Adam Das, then you stop in midstream. Stop in midstream and shift to Tikanta Shabbos Retzitza Karban, because since we have this Machlokes, a day of Rishayna and a day of Shnia here in the Mechaber, we're going to go with Safer Brachas L'Kula. We're not going to allow you to say the Chasima of the bracha and be Moitzi Shem Shamayim based on a suffix, and therefore you're going to shift right away. You're going to stop in midstream and shift into the proper Shabbos davening. Now we go to Sif Gimel, second line down here in the Shulchan Aruch, Mem Gimel Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber, Im hayasavar shehu chol. If somebody actually thought that it was a weekday, somebody was a little bit spaced out by davening, maybe he came late to davening and he didn't realize that, hey, this is a Shabbos davening going on, but somebody was somehow operating under the mistaken idea that today is actually a weekday. Im hayasavar shehu chol, v'hischil adaita de chol. So he didn't just goof and start the wrong Shmoneh Esrei. He actually thought that today is Wednesday. It's not Shabbos, it's Wednesday. So he went with full kavana, Hakel HaKadosh, Ata, and he said the word Ata, intending fully to say Chaynen. Ata Chaynen Lamdas. He started with the full intent to daven a vachadik Shmoneh Esrei. Ema Yasavar Shu Chayil. V'hischil adaita dechayil. And he started the Shmoneh Esrei having the intention to daven a vachadik Shmoneh Esrei. Umiyad kisha'amar tevas Ata. And now all he said was Ata. Nizgar koidim sha'amar Chaynen. He didn't even say Chaynen. He only said Ata. Havalei hischil b'shel chayil. That's called that you started davening the weekday Shmoneh Esrei and you started reciting the bracha of Ata Chaynen. Now, there's an inherent chiddush over here, and I'll tell you what that is. Realize that Friday night Ma'ariv, the nusach of the Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei is Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel HaKadosh. The very next word is Ata. By Shabbos afternoon Mincha, the nusach of the Shmoneh Esrei, Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel HaKadosh, the very next word is Ata. It's not that way by Shachris. By Shachris, it's Baruch Atah Hashem HaKel HaKadosh, the next word is Yismach. But by Shachris and by Mincha, the very next word after HaKel HaKadosh is Ata. Now, the case that we're talking about over here, the guy was mamish planning on davening a vachadik Shmoneh Esrei. So he went Baruch Atah Hashem HaKel HaKadosh, and then he said Ata with full kavana to be saying Chaynen next. He wasn't planning on saying Kidashta. He wasn't planning on saying echad, right? He was planning on saying choinen. Says the Mechaber, once you said ata, since you had fully in mind, you were intending on continuing with the very next word choinen, which is a vachadik nusach, that was your full intent. Once you said ata, says the Mechaber, and now you remembered koidim she'amar choinen. You didn't say choinen yet. Still, havale hiskel b'shel chayil. That's called that you started the weekday bracha of ata choinen, and therefore the halacha of sif beis kicks in the gomer oisa bracha. So now you have to finish the bracha of ata choinen l'adam das all the way through to Baruch Atah Hashem choinen adas, and then you'll shift back to the Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. Aval, however, continues the Mechaber, what if you weren't operating under the mistaken idea that it's Tuesday? You knew it was Shabbos. Aval, im ha'yidei shu Shabbos. You knew that it was Shabbos. V'shaloi b'kavana hiskel teves ata. It was the hergel of your lips. You're so used to saying Baruch Atah Hashem HaKel HaKadosh Ata Chodein L'Adam Das. So you know it's Shabbos. You were intending on having a Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei, but you went Baruch Atah Hashem HaKel HaKadosh Ata. What Ata? And you remembered right after you said Ata that I'm not supposed to be saying Ata Chodein. I'm not supposed to be saying Ata Chodein. If it's Friday night, I am supposed to say Ata, but I'm not. No Ata, but not Ata Chodein, right? So. He started the word ata from the hergel haloshin, because that's where his lips are used to going. They're used to going to ata choinen. But he knows it's Shabbos. He wanted to daven a Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. Says the Mechaber, afilu imhu betfila shachris. Even if he's davening the shachris Shmoneh Esrei of Shabbos, where the first word after HaKel HaKadosh is not ata, it's yismach. She'ena Peseches ba'ata, the bracha of Kedushas Hayom Shabbos morning doesn't start with ata. It starts with Yismach. Einoi goymer berchas ata choinen. You don't finish the bracha of ata choinen. Why? The chashvina leiketah betfilah Shabbos bein zu lezu. You see, in this case, where the guy really didn't make a mistake, he didn't think it was Tuesday. He wasn't intending on davening a vachadik Shmoneh Esrei. He wanted to daven a Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. But his hergel haloshin went to the word ata instead of saying yismach. We're not going to consider that as him having begun the bracha of ata choinen. Instead, what we're going to say is, you know why he said ata? He knows it's Shabbos. Two of the Shmoneh Esreis on Shabbos, the bracha of Kedushas Hayom starts with ata. Friday night, ata kidashta, Shabbos mincha, ata echad. So we're going to look at it, we're going to say, nah. He wasn't going to say choinen. He was going to say kidashta. Or he was going to say echad. So he wasn't going into a weekday Shmoneh Esrei. He was going into the wrong Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. But the wrong Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei is a bracha of Kedushas Hayom. Every one of the brachas of Shmoneh Esrei, Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, they all end up Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadosh Shabbos. It's all the middle bracha of Shmoneh Esrei at Shabbos, Birchas Hayom. Friday night, it starts Ata Kidashta. Shabbos, it starts Yismach Moshe. Mincha, it starts Ata Echad V'Shimcha Echad. They all end up Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadosh Shabbos. So, again, in Sif Beis, we said, you accidentally start the weekday brachas. So, Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, you have to finish the bracha that you started, and then you shift it to the Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. Now in Sif Gimel, says the Mechaber, if all you said was ata, and you caught yourself before choinen, it depends what your mindset was. If your mindset was really to say ata choinen, you have to be self-aware. You have to catch yourself. What was your mindset? Was your mindset to say ata choinen? If your mindset was to say ata choinen, that's called you started ata choinen. You have to complete ata choinen all the way through to Baruch Atah Hashem chodein adas, and then shift it to the Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. But if that wasn't your mindset wasn't to say ata choinen. What was your mindset? I don't know, but your mindset was to daven the Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. That's for sure. You weren't thinking ata choinen. You were thinking it's Shabbos. You said ata. Okay, if it's Friday night, it could be ata kidashta. If it's Shabbos, it could be ata echad. But even Shabbos morning, you said ata. You should have said ata. You should have said yismach. You said ata. If your mindset was a Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei, we're not going to call it that you started the weekday bracha of ata choinen. Instead, we're going to say You said Ata, you were thinking Friday night, you were thinking Shabbos Mincha. It's not called that you started the bracha of Ata Chaynein, and right away, even Shabbos morning, if it's Friday night or Shabbos Mincha, it's easy. So right away, you'll say Kidashta, you'll say Echad. But even Shabbos morning, wipe out the Ata and say Yismach. Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkai. That's the halacha here in Sif Gimel. So again, if you thought it was Tuesday and you started Ata having fully in mind to say Chaynein, but you remembered and you caught yourself before you said Chaynein, so then that's considered you started the bracha of Ata Chaynein, and therefore the Gomer is a bracha. But if you knew full well it's Shabbos, you said Ata not having in mind Chaynein. Even if you're davening the Shabbos Shachris Shmon Esrei with the word Ata is completely inappropriate, then you do not complete the bracha of Ata Chaynein because we're going to consider it that you didn't make a mistake to go to a weekday Shmon Esrei, you made a mistake to go to the wrong Shabbos Shmon Esrei, and therefore you do not complete Ata Chaynein. And the Ramah expands upon what the Mechaber is saying. Because we could look at it, we could say he meant to say Ata Kidashta or Ata Echad, which are both Shabbos Shmona Esreis. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Vav. Kishamar Tevis Ata. Ayin beBeis Yosef. Take a look at the Beis Yosef. The Svirle, where the Beis Yosef holds. Da'afilu ba'arvis u'mincha sheyachal l'sayim ba'ata kidashta v'ata echad. Even if you're davening Friday night Ma'ariv or you're davening Shabbos afternoon Mincha, where you could say, you said Ata. This is going back on the first case of the Mechaber. You said Ata, thinking that you're going to daven a weekday Shmon Esrei. You fully intended to say Chaynein, but you caught yourself after Ata. So the halach is you got to finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein. Says the Mishnah Berurah that the Beis Yosef holds that this is true even Friday night Ma'ariv, even Shabbos afternoon Mincha, where you would think the guy only said Ata. Why are we telling him to finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein? Let him just say Kidashta or Echad. Why are we telling him to finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein? Beis Yosef holds no. He has to finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein. Why? Because this guy said Ata, fully intending to say the next word Chaynein. So therefore, that's Hiskil B'Shel Chayil. That means he said Ata starting the weekday bracha of Ata Chaynein. And therefore the halach of Sif Beis kicks in. The Gomer Brechas Ata Chaynein, he has to finish it. But for Magen Avram Chilkalav, the Magen Avram takes issue with the Beis Yosef. He takes issue with the Mechaber. With Svir Alei, the Magen Avram holds that Dafka b'tfila shakri she'ena mascha b'tevis Ata. Magen Avram says, I would only apply this halacha, this psak, to Shabbos morning Shmon Esrei, Shabbos morning Shachris. Friday night, even if the person said Ata, having fully in mind to say Chaynein, the Magen Avram says, I'm going to tell him just say Kidashta. Shabbos Mincha, he said Ata, having fully in mind to say Chaynein, I'm going to tell him say Echad. Ata Echad v'shibcha Echad. It's only Shabbos Shachris, where the guy said Ata, having in mind to say Chaynein. Over there, the word Ata is wholly inappropriate. He was supposed to say Yismach. Over there, the Magen Avram says, I agree. Over there, you said Ata, you got to finish Ata Chaynein. So Svir Lei, the Magen Avram holds, the Dafka b'tfila Shachris is only by Shachris. She'ena maschil b'tevis Ata, where the bracha of Kedushas Hayom does not begin with Ata. And therefore, on Minkar b'diburoi, it's very obvious from what he said, Shehu l'shem Chayil, he said Ata instead of Yismach. Obviously, he was going to say Ata Chaynein. Aval ba'arvis u'mincha, kevin dolei Minkar b'diburoi, but by Friday night Ma'ariv, or by Shabbos afternoon Mincha, where we can't tell from what he said that he was going to say Avacha Tika Bracha, because it could be Ata Kidashta or Ata Echad, Loi Mikri Al Yidei Zeh Hiskel B'Shel Chayil, and therefore V'yarmar Ata Kidashta V'Ata Echad, V'chein Das HaPri Begadim V'Derech HaChaim, and that the Pri Begadim agrees with the Magen Avram, and so does the Derech HaChaim. It sounds over here very much like, from the Mishnah Berurah, like he's being Machriya, like this Pri Begadim, this Derech HaChaim, and this Magen Avram, that by Friday night Ma'ariv, by Shabbos afternoon Mincha, even if you said Ata with full kavanah to continue to Chaynein, shift to Kidashta or Echad. It's only by Shabbos morning Shachris. You said Ata instead of saying Yismach, even though you didn't say Chaynein. You said Ata. Over there, we're going to tell you, you said Ata having in mind to say Chaynein. Now you got to finish the bracha of Ata Chaynein. Ois Kat Zayin. But what if this person said Ata without kavanah to say Chaynein? He did it v'shaloi b'kavanah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kat Zayin with Zayin Leimar. What the Mechaber means to say is, why did he say Ata? Shenichshal b'l'shoyne machbas hergeloi d'choil. He's used to Hakel HaKadosh Ata. That's why he said Ata. Avaloinus kavid l'shem tfilas chayil, but he didn't have kavanah to daven a weekday Shmoneh Esrei. L'kach therefore l'chashvina l'kischel tfilas chayil. That's why if he just said Ata and he didn't say Chaynein, we're not going to jump yet and say that he necessarily meant to make a weekday bracha. No, Ata could be Ata Kidashta or Ata Echad. V'dafkim hiskal rak tevis Ata. But that's only if he only said Ata. Avalam Amar Ata Chaynein. Once he said Ata Chaynein, all bets are off. Avalam Amar Ata Chaynein, Shamuchach Shu L'Shem Chayil. Now you said Chaynein, obviously you're making a weekday bracha. Avagav Sheyirak Machma Shenichshal B'Shoynai. Even if again he only did it out of hergel. He wanted to daven a Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei, but he went Baruch Hashem HaKel HaKadosh Ata Chaynein. Oh, what am I doing? So he did it not because he intended to daven a weekday Shmoneh Esrei. It's just a hergel l'shaynai. Hakel HaKadosh Ata Chaynein. Doesn't matter. You said Chaynein. If you said Chaynein, so then the very words that you spoke are moichiach. They prove that you intended to make a weekday bracha. And then Garma Kaloisa bracha, you have to finish the bracha. Va'ayin bebir halacha for greater detail. Ois katan ches. So the Mechaber said over here, if you said Ata without kavanah to say Chaynein, so then we're going to say that it didn't mean that you started a weekday bracha, because we're going to look at you and we're going to say, you said Ata? Okay, it could be Ata Kidashta. You said Ata, it could be Ata Echad. Even if you said Ata by Shabbos morning Shachris, where Ata is wholly inappropriate. It doesn't matter. You didn't have kavanah for a weekday Shmoneh Esrei. You just said Ata. Chashvinan leis katneches lefi de beteves Ata in a mikar shul l'shem Ata Chaynein. The word Ata is not moichiach. It doesn't prove that you were intending on making a weekday bracha. Taharei yachal amar Ata Kidashta or va'ata Echad. V'zeu kavanas haRamah, and this is what the Ramah means when he adds in shesim taharei yachal loymar. Valkein, and therefore dinai k'may she'im hayamaschal Ata b'zman tvilas shachris Ata Kidashta ayata Echad v'diskabem tzabracha. What would be the halach of Shabbos morning Shachris? Somebody said, Hakel HaKadosh Ata Kidashta Siyam Shvil L'Shmecha Tachlis Maaseh Shemayim V'Aretz. What would the halacha be? The halacha would be the Paisik. You interrupt wherever you're up to. Or Maskal Tekef Yismach Moshe. No problem. V'Achinami Kishomer Ata. So Shabbos morning Shachris, he said Ata. So okay. So he said Ata. So Komer Ata Kidashta. It's no worse than if you would have said Ata Kidashta. Upaisik u'Maskal Yismach Moshe. So you'll break off in midstream and you'll say Yismach Moshe. V'lo yehev Komer Ata Chaynein Ligmar Bracha. Okay, Sif Daled. Another interesting case. Mi shehispalel tefillah shel choil b'Shabbos. Somebody went and he davened a full weekday Shmoneh Esrei on Shabbos. He didn't catch himself anywhere. He davened a full, complete weekday Shmoneh Esrei on Shabbos. Mi shehispalel tefillah shel choil b'Shabbos v'lo yizker shel Shabbos. And he never mentioned Shabbos in the entire Shmoneh Esrei. Lo yotza. He's not yotze his chiyuv of tefillah. His Shmoneh Esrei was grossly incomplete. On Shabbos, you were chuyev to mention Kedushas Hayom. You have to mention Shabbos. He didn't mention Shabbos. V'im hizkir shel Shabbos b'say Shmoneh Esrei. But let's say he mentioned Shabbos. Somewhere in Shmoneh Esrei, he mentioned Shabbos. V'im hizkir shel Shabbos b'say Shmoneh Esrei. Af al pi sheloi kava bracha l'Shabbos. He didn't insert an independent bracha for Shabbos. It's not like he davened the full weekday Shmoneh Esrei, and then somewhere in the middle, he said, Ata Kiddush Yom Shvil L'Shmecha Tachlis Maaseh Shemayim V'Aretz, and he said the whole thing, Elokeinu Elokeinu V'Seinu Ritzeva Menuchaseinu, and he went all the way through Baruch Atah Hashem HaKadosh Shabbos. No, he didn't do that. All he did was, somewhere in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei, he mentioned Kedusha Shabbos. V'im hizker shel Shabbos b'say Shmoneh Esrei, Afal pi sheloi kava bracha l'Shabbos, even though he didn't put in a full Shabbos bracha, Yotza, then he is Yotza, his Chiyav. of tefillah on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut and test. Shel chayil b'Shabbos. This fellow davened a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, how about a person who has a suffix? This is a crazy suffix. This is a guy who's completely spaced out. I mean, this guy needs a smack. This guy davened Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos. He finished Shemoneh Esrei. He took 3 steps back, and now he goes, boy, I have no idea what I just said. I have this like sneaking suspicion that I might have davened a weekday Shemoneh Esrei. I don't know what I said. Maybe I davened Rosh Hashanah Shemoneh Esrei. I don't know what I said. So this guy has a suffix. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Gam Kein Tzarich Lachzor. He has to repeat Shemoneh Esrei. You know why? If he was so spaced out, he probably just davened the Shemoneh Esrei that he's most used to saying, which would be the weekday Shemoneh Esrei. He brings this down from the El Yerab and the Chayadim. Ois Kat and Yud, Lo Yotza. You daven a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos, you're not Yotze Yechiv Tefillah. V'hoadin b'Yom the same halach applies on Yom Tov. You daven a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei without mentioning Sukkos. You daven a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei without mentioning Pesach or Shavuos or whatever Yom Tov you want. You're not Yotze Yechiv of Tefillah because you failed to mention Yom Tov. V'afilu b'Yom Tov Sheni, and this is true even on Yom Tov Sheni. What's the Chiddush? Well, Yom Tov Sheni is only Sfeika D'Yoma. Maybe Yom Tov Sheni is really a weekday. Doesn't matter. You have to daven a Yom Tov Shemoneh Esrei. Okay, so the Mechaber said here so far, if you davened a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos and you never mentioned Shabbos, you're not Yotze. But if you mentioned Shabbos, even if you didn't insert a full Shabbos bracha, let's say you davened a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei and you said Ritzei, and then in the bracha of Ritzei you inserted Yalav Yavoy. And in Yalav Yavoy you said V'Zachreinu b'Yom HaShabbos Hazeh. Okay, you mentioned Shabbos. Did you insert a Shabbos bracha? No, Yalav Yavoy is not a complete bracha. Yalav Yavoy is a paragraph that we insert in the middle of the bracha of Avodah, in the middle of the bracha that begins with Ritzei and ends with V'Sechazeh Neinu Baruch Atah Hashem Hamachzeh Shechinaseh L'Tzion. So you didn't put in a Shabbos bracha. You just mentioned Me'ein HaMa'urah. You mentioned Shabbos somewhere in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei. Then the Mechaber says you are Yotze. Interestingly enough, I heard a story about a Kehillah that did this, believe it or not. This was a Yid who traveled, I believe it was in the early 90s, to Siberia. And he was like a shtickler Rav in an old Yiddish community that still existed in Siberia from pre-war days. They were cut off completely from the rest of the world, and they were cut off completely from the Yiddish world. They davened Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos. They davened a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei, but they said Yalav Yavoy, and in Yalav Yavoy they said Zachreinu b'Yom HaShabbos Hazeh. Imagine? But guess what? The halach is that if you do that, you are Yotze Tefillah. Continues the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber, not the Mechaber, says the Ramah, 3 lines off the bottom. Hagah. How about b'Musaf? Let's say somebody davened a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei by Musaf on Shabbos. Says the Ramah, b'Musaf, afilu loy amar, and this is the halacha that we referenced earlier. Afilu loy amar rak v'naseh lefanecha es chayvayseinu. If you daven a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei for the Musaf tefillah, and you just insert a short little phrase, you insert somewhere in the Shemoneh Esrei, v'naseh lefanecha es chayvayseinu, Rabbeinu Shalom, we will perform before you our obligations, b'tamidei yoim, by bringing the carbon tamid, the tamid shal shachar, and the tamid shal bein harabayim, u'b'carbon musaf, and we will bring the appropriate carbon musaf, but you don't even mention the psukim of the carbon musaf. Yotze, you're Yotze. He brings this down for the Beis Yosef in the name of the Rosh. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton, Yod Aleph. You'd have a full weekday Shemoneh Esrei, but you just put in this little phrase referencing the chiyuv of the carbon musaf. Yoytze, rak v'nasa. Ritzayin Alarma, what the Ramah wants to say is, Sha'amar ba'achas min ha'brachas, in middle of one of the brachas of the weekday Shemoneh Esrei, in middle of a Shiva Shayftenu Kavar Yishayna, you put in a phrase. What's that phrase? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yehi ratzayin shanasa lefanecha. It should be your will that we should be able to perform before you our chiyuvim of bringing the karbonos tamid and the karbonos musaf. Certainly, if you would actually take the text of the Musaf Shemona Esrei from the Musaf Shemona Esrei, Rak Shechiser Apsukim Shel Karbanos, and you just leave out the psukim from the Torah that delineate the appropriate Karban Musaf, the Yotza, you certainly would be Yotza. Okay, let's push on just a little bit more here. Sif Hey. Ta, let's say somebody goofs on Shabbos, for his Spal Shel Choil b'Shabbos. And again, he davened the weekday Shemona Esrei on Shabbos. V'lo yizker shel Shabbos. And he never mentioned Shabbos. If he mentioned Shabbos, even wherever, he's Yaitza. But he didn't mention Shabbos. He davened the full weekday Shemona Esrei without mentioning Shabbos. And now he gets all the way to the end of Shemona Esrei. What does he do? Says the Mechaber, it depends. Im akar raglov, if he uprooted his feet. What does that mean? He stepped out of Shemona Esrei. He took the three steps back. Imako Raglov, Chayzel Rosh. His Shemona Esrei is over. He stepped out of Shemona Esrei. His Shemona Esrei is now concluded. He davened the weekday Shemona Esrei without mentioning Shabbos. He's not Yoitza. So Chayzel Rosh. He's got to go back to the beginning of Shemona Esrei. He's got to start all over again and daven again. Vim Loyaka Raglov. But if he did not uproot his feet, what does that mean? He didn't uproot his feet. He didn't step out of Shemona Esrei. Vim Loyaka Raglov. Even though he completed Shemona Esrei, Einoi Chayzer Elul Shel Shabbos. He completed his Shemona Esrei, but he didn't step out of Shemona Esrei, so he has to go back. But what does that mean? He has to go back. So if it's Friday night Ma'ariv, he will now start saying Ata Kidashta Es Yom Shvi Lishmecha, and he will continue from there through the end of Shemona Esrei, and he will repeat the last three brachas of Shemona Esrei. But does he have to repeat the first three brachas of Shemona Esrei? No. So he said, Hamavarech Esama Yisrael Bashalem. Oh my goodness, what did I do? I just davened the whole weekday Shemona Esrei without mentioning Shabbos. Okay. And go through to the end of Shemona Esrei. Now, we have to be very careful here. The way the Mechaber said this, the Mechaber said, what constitutes ending Shemona Esrei? That's the shaila that the Mechaber is dealing with. What the Mechaber is saying is, we established in Sif Dalet that if on Shabbos you davened a full weekday Shemona Esrei without mentioning Shabbos, you're not Yoytze Yechiv of Tefillah. Therefore, you have to daven over again. The question now in Sif Hey is, what does it mean that you finished davening Shemona Esrei without mentioning Shabbos so that you should have to daven over again? What does that mean? Says the Mechaber, what it means, the delineating point is, were you akar raglov? Did you step out of Shemona Esrei or not? If you already stepped out of Shemona Esrei, then you concluded your Shemona Esrei. You didn't mention Shabbos, you got to start again. If you didn't step out of Shemona Esrei, then you did not conclude your Shemona Esrei. If you didn't conclude your Shemona Esrei, you could just go back to either Ata Kidashta or Yismach Moshe or Ata Echad. You don't have to go back all the way to the beginning. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber is not being so meduyik over here. He's not giving you the complete picture, because what constitutes the end of your Shemona Esrei is not necessarily whether or not you were okar raglov. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Beis, Loy okar raglov, Ayin le'el b'simin kuf yud zayin sif hey. He sends us back to Chelik Aleph, to Siman kuf yud zayin sif hey, of a Mishnah Berurah Sham. So, if we take a look at kuf yud zayin sif hey, the Mechaber over there is talking about somebody who did not say V'sein talumato levracha. So again, we're talking about, did you finish Shemona Esrei? Did you not finish Shemona Esrei? What do you have to do? And over there also, the Mechaber refers to Akar Raglov, stepping out of Shemona Esrei, as marking the conclusion of your Shemona Esrei. But over there, the Mechaber expands upon that halacha a little bit. And he says like this, V'im hishlim tfilasai. If you finished your Shemona Esrei, what does that mean you finished your Shemona Esrei? You said, Baruch atah Hashem hamavarech esama Yisrael b'shalom. That is the end of Shemona Esrei. That's the conclusion of the last brach of Shemona Esrei. So says the Mechaber, if you finished your Shemona Esrei, you said, hamavarech esama Yisrael b'shalom, ve'enoi rogil loymar tachanunim achar tfilasai, and you're not in the habit of adding on any other tefillos at the end of Shemona Esrei. So that means you say, Baruch atah Hashem hamavarech esama Yisrael b'shalom, and you're done. You take 3 steps back. You don't say Elokei Nitzar. You don't say Yehi Ratzon. You don't say any of that. You just say, I'm Mavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom, and you step out of Shemoneh Esrei. Then, says the Mechaber, Afal Pisha Adayin Lo Yokar Raglov, even if you didn't step out of Shemoneh Esrei, Ka'akurim Dami. It's as if you did. So you hear what the Mechaber is saying? Again, the whole question over here is, what constitutes the conclusion of your Shemoneh Esrei? If you daven the full weekday Shemoneh Esrei and you didn't mention Shabbos, and you concluded your Shemoneh Esrei, you got to go back all the way to the beginning. Says the Mechaber by us, what constitutes concluding Shemoneh Esrei? Whether you stepped out of Shemoneh Esrei or not. But if we look at Siman Kuf Yud Zayin, we see it's not the whole story. Really, if you say Baruch Atah Hashem HaMavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom, and you're not in the habit of saying Elokai Nitzar or anything else, then that marks the conclusion of your Shemoneh Esrei, whether you stepped out of Shemoneh Esrei or not. So you said B'Shalom, and you didn't mention Shabbos, you got to go back to the beginning. Now, how about if you are used to saying Elokai Nitzar? So over there, the Mishnah Berurah says, in Ois Katan Yud Ches, over there at Kuf Yud Zayin Sif Hey, the Mishnah Berurah says over there, if you are in the habit of adding Tachanunim, which we are, so then you said Mavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom, your Shemoneh Esrei is not over, because you still say Tachanunim. What marks the end of your Shemoneh Esrei? Not the Yul Ratzon right after Hamavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom. Some people put a Yul Ratzon over there. The Yul Ratzon at the end of Elokai Nitzar. So you're used to saying additional Tachnunim. So then your Shemoneh Esrei doesn't end Hamavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom. You still have to say your Tachnunim. What marks the end of your Shemoneh Esrei? When you finish your Tachanunim and you say Yul Ratzon Imrifi V'Hagin Libi L'Fanach Hashem Tzuri V'Gayali, that's the end of your Shemoneh Esrei, just like Mavarchas Am Yisrael B'Shalom is the end of the Shemoneh Esrei if you don't say Tachanunim. And then, if you said Yul Ratzon, even if you didn't step out of Shemoneh Esrei, your Shemoneh Esrei is over. You didn't mention Shabbos, you got to go back to the beginning. One more Mishnah Berurah over here. Ois Katan Yud Gimel. The Mechaber said, if you didn't conclude your Shemoneh Esrei, in the words of the Mechaber, if you weren't Okar Raglov, but again, what it means is if you didn't conclude your Shemoneh Esrei, whatever marks the conclusion of your Shemoneh Esrei, then you don't have to go back to the beginning. You just have to go back Lishel Shabbos. What does that mean you have to go back Lishel Shabbos? You got to go back to either Ata Kidashta for Ma'ariv, or Yisrach Moshe for Shachris, or Tikanta Shabbos for Musaf, or Ata Echad for Mincha. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now, he says a Chiddush here. Va'afil, not a Chiddush, but he's just pointing something out. Va'afil nizkar koidem moidim, lo yichla lo yisa ba'avoid the loimer etzei navim duchasenu b'yam HaShabbos. The lachatchil sarach loimer bracha l'kedushas hayom u'b'diavad yotza. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, you might think, what if I remember in middle of Ritzei? Now, middle of Ritzei is always where we put Yalav Yavai to mention Me'ena Ma'ura of all of the Yom Tovim. You might think if I remember in middle of Ritzei, maybe I should just mention Shabbos in middle of Ritzei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Even if you catch yourself in middle of Ritzei, you have to now recite the full bracha of Kedushas Hayom of Shabbos that starts at the Kidashto by Ma'ariv and ends Baruch Atah Hashem B'Kaddish Shabbos, and so on and so forth for the other Shemoneh Esreis. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. This of Limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael, the Ran Shem Shitzen, Yeshua's for first Parnasset Sheduktim to all those in need, and we should be zoichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek B'Mheriv Yameinu. Amen. Be well.